Have you ever wondered where Pokemon trainers make their money from? And so many other trainers set out on their adventures without a sustainable source of income, aka a job. Let's find out. First, we have to understand the Pokemon economy. Well, let's use a circular flow model to figure it out. This is a Pokemon video, right? And I know this looks like a mess, so let's figure out what this all means as we figure out what these titles signify in the Pokemon world. First, let's determine the government in the Pokemon world. Yes, seriously. This is not such an easy question to answer since there is no main system that maintains everything. When you take a step back, it does seem like the Pokemon League in pretty much every generation maintains the order of things as best as they can. The gym leaders and champions in most generations take upon themselves these roles. For example, Trader was the actual mayor of his city, and we often see other characters like him help out in the region. And while I'm not sure if this has been confirmed or debunked, I've always sort of just assumed that the Pokemon Center gets funded by the Pokemon League. So we'll say that the Pokemon League is generally the source of funds in the Pokemon world. But if the Pokemon League is just constantly making money, where does that go? And since they can't just print an infinite amount, since that would cause the value of money to decrease as everyone will have more money to spend, and companies like the boutiques will have to increase their prices because if they didn't, they'd run out of stock super quickly since everyone's buying it, save a lot of money. Why am I explaining the economy in a Pokemon video again? We know that the government, the Pokemon League, must be taking money from other sources too. So everything's balanced, and that's called taxes. Talking about taxes in the Pokemon video, maybe I'm not fit for this job. Okay, so who pays taxes in the Pokemon world? Well, if we take the circular foam diagram, that would be your parents' house and stores such as the boutique shops and item shops. They'll take their parts of their earnings to give to the government. But where do they get the money from? Well, let's say your parents supposedly work. Even though the husband is always missing and the mother seems to be a stay-at-home, you know what? I'm not going to ask. Let's just say one of your neighbors works for the local farm, and the local farm pays them a decent salary. Now, where does this local farm get their money from to pay your neighbor? From the local grocery market they sell it to, because the local grocery market is the one that's actually selling the produce to random people like you, while the farm is actually growing the produce. And where does this grocery store get their money from to buy the produce from the farm? Well, they're getting it from you, the player character, and other households and trainers, and pretty much everyone since everyone needs groceries. And this is our economic circular model diagram for Pokemon, with the Pokemon League in the center of all of it, making sure everything outside of it is running smoothly. Now, if you didn't understand what I just said, I'm sorry, but be glad I didn't explain what this is. So now that we understand the economics of the Pokemon world, that'll take us one step further towards understanding where all of these little pixels of code get their dough from. Well, we can first assume the professor of the region and other related things towards understanding Pokemon is probably either self-funded by savings, donations, or collaboration with the Pokemon League government. Why collaborations? Well, because they encourage you to become a Pokemon trainer, besides gathering info for the decks, which seems to be the Pokemon League's main interest. But why? Why would the Pokemon League be willing to hand you free stuff, expecting nothing in return for you to become a Pokemon trainer? It doesn't really make much sense. That free stuff that they're giving you coming through the professor, who while has his own goals, is sort of working together. It doesn't make sense. Unless you take a step back for a moment and take notice of the commercialization of gym leaders and champions. In Generation 5, all of the gym leaders had a part to play in their respective towns and cities. Take Terran as an example. His role is to be a gym leader, while also being a teacher at a school. This also serves to keep his students growing and learning with real experience and observing his battles. In addition, there's the depth with them being part of the town. Therefore, he benefits the town. It all comes full circle. Well, in Generation 6, I can't really think of what kind of involvement the gym leaders had canonically. In Generation 7, they definitely did, being sort of responsible for their islands. But what do these examples have to do with the Pokemon League supporting your journey? In fact, why would they fund the gym leaders in the first place? Well, it appears like the gym leaders naturally take up a role of someone who benefits the people around them in some way. Albeit in Generation 7 there was no real government, aka no official Pokemon League, it seems to have been a more traditional way of doing things, but back to the point, if they encourage you to be a gym leader, it naturally helps the region as a whole because you would be helping society. But what about Generation 8, where it's considered a sport? So while the gym leaders maybe aren't benefiting the citizens directly, the intention is that they are getting entertainment, which is why the trainer supported needs a letter of endorsement to make sure that they have enough potential to be strong, to make a big splash in the battling entertainment industry, and to garner fans. Since they tune in on TV or go to the live stadiums, the Pokemon League naturally gets their funding through less direct means than taxes here, while providing more direct benefit to the consumer. In Generation 9, the gym leaders once more took a step back, since now, we the player characters are being funded by the Academy to adventure out, which fits in line with what we know. Gita also seems to have a more chairman role in the place, over an actual champion, since Nomona is also a champion but also sort of a student, so it seems like Gita is the one running the show. And we also know that the gym leaders are employed. I imagine the reason for having gym battles is to work in collaboration with the Academy in helping the students learn. How does the Academy make their money? I'm not really sure because it doesn't seem like they charge for tuition, but I'm sure it comes from somewhere, right? Maybe donations? So we figured out the main funding, but what about the smaller stuff? Trainers and establishments in Pokemon. Well, most trainers have some kind of profession from where you can guess where they get their money from. A child gets a small allowance from their parents, while the working classes have jobs that work within the Pokemon world. Perhaps they're professional swimmers or professional football players even. And then there's just a lot of trainer classes too. Furthermore, when it comes to the basic economy between trainers, when you win a battle, you get money, and when you lose, you pay up. So trainers are sort of just funding each other based on the money they make from outside sources. There are a lot of more establishments and trainers in Pokemon that we could probably delve deep into, but at this point I don't think it would be so interesting because I think you could really figure it out for yourself. I'm curious to think where you think trainers are getting their money from. But in any case, I think we got a lot closer to understanding the Pokemon economy. Thank you guys so much for watching and have a wonderful day. See you!